Hello and welcome to Tonight at 8 from the RSGB. Now, not so long ago, amateur television was all analogue and live video took up a relatively large chunk of spectrum for every QSO. But the ATV hobby has embraced digital compression so that very high quality communications can be made using a fraction of the bandwidth, and it's also relatively straightforward to make your own equipment from readily available parts. As we'll find out now from the Secretary of the British Amateur Television Club, Noel Matthews, G8GTZ. So a very warm welcome to Tonight at 8, Noel. Could you start by just giving us a quick overview of what you'll be covering this evening?
Yes, good evening, Dave, and good evening, everybody. Yes, tonight I hope to just give an overview of where amateur television is today. As you say, it's changed significantly over the years, and take a look at activity in the UK, take three sort of examples of where activity is on the air, and also look at some of the equipment that people can now build to get involved in the digital amateur television scene.
Oh, sounds great. And before Noel's presentation, a reminder that if you're watching this on Monday, the 6th of December, then this is live. And you can ask questions and make comments on either BATC or YouTube at any time during the presentation or straight afterwards. Please include your first name and your call sign if you have one within every message. Also, please note that you can make this video stream fill your screen on most devices, usually by double-clicking on the picture or pressing the full screen button. But now it's time to go back to Noel to find out all about narrowband amateur TV.
Yes, thank you, David. I've entitled the talk Further Advances in Amateur Television. And that's really, it's a follow-on from a couple of presentations I did at RSGB Conventions, where we introduced the fact that digital TV or amateur television is going digital, and that there were some significant changes coming along, but also some of the benefits and the advantages of going digital. So tonight, I'm going to quickly cover exactly what is amateur television, look at the analog versus digital change that's happening, a look at the activity in the UK and the bands we operate and repeaters that are available. Then I want to take three examples of amateur television on the air, and I'm going to look at the low bands, as we call them, the bands below 70 centimeters. Have a look at a bit higher, but much easier way to get on amateur television with 5.6 gigahertz equipment, and then have a look at the activity on the QO100 satellite, which has really changed the face of amateur television. Then I'll take a look at how you can get involved, how you can build equipment very easily, even though it is digital. The advent of things like the Raspberry Pi have really made this much easier for us all. So what is amateur television? Well, ATV or amateur television is a niche area of amateur radio, but it encompasses a whole range of activities and includes things like video production, video editing, and transmission. And although a lot of us are interested in the transmission side of things, we also find people restoring classic cameras or outside broadcast fans, and even going and using Raspberry Pis to transmit downlinks from rockets. And just for reference, amateur television in our terms, or in the context of the talk tonight, really refers to fast scan TV, not SSTV, as is being downlinked from the ISS. We don't really call that amateur television. We refer to what we know as fast scan TV. And DATV is obviously digital amateur television. So having determined exactly what amateur television is, may be useful as to take a look at why do we do amateur television? That's probably the hardest question to answer. And really, I can sum it up in saying that a picture is worth 1,000 words. It's much easier to try and to show something than to try and explain. And there's a couple of pictures there over on the side, one taken off from an amateur in South London, who was talking about one of the PCBs that he's building up. And rather than try and explain the PCB, he held it up to the camera and showed everybody. The other aspect of amateur television is that it gives an opportunity to experiment, build and learn. There isn't any commercial equipment available, but there are plenty of ideas and projects and a whole load of support and help from a friendly community. And the other aspect of amateur television that appeals to a lot of us is it gives us a freedom to experiment on air, and we run contests and activity days, and the frequencies we cover these days go right down to 29 megahertz and right up to 76 gigahertz. And particularly going low down to 29 megahertz has only been possible because we have moved to digital technologies. And so when we look at what's happening in digital, amateurs have been playing or experimenting with digital for the last 20 odd years. And in fact, the first tests were in the UK were done in 2001 at the GB3 AT repeater. And the top picture there shows the massive 19-inch rack equipment we had to use to get GB3 AT to go digital. And the bottom picture is a picture of the BATC Portsdown. And whilst the scale doesn't look particularly good, that screen is 7 inches across. And the bottom box is more capable than the multiple top boxes in the top picture. So where we're at is we have realized significant bandwidth and picture quality gains with digital, but it's also helped us to address one of the pressing issues, particularly on the higher bands where there is pressure on spectrum. And those of you who know, we lost about 40 megahertz in 13 SEMs a couple of years ago, and we see continuing pressure on the spectrum we're using. So all of our developments, the recent developments have really been digital, but to try and make those easier to adopt, we're using broadcast standards. So the video coding we do is MPEG-2, H.264 or H2 MPEG-4, or an H.265 video coding. And we use transmission standards, which are really taken from the broadcast world. So DVB-S and DVB-T. And all of that has helped us have an early and easy adoption of digital. And these technologies enable us to transmit full frame video in bandwidths below 100 kilohertz, right up to 4 megahertz. And it is enabling ATV in places and spectrum where we never thought it would be possible to do ATV. So going digital, the real benefit really has been the spectrum. And with FM video, which is what we used to run on 23 SEMs, up to 16 megahertz wide, very wide spectrum. And we ran 2 sound subcarriers. And as I say, total occupied bandwidth was around about 16 megahertz. And that didn't really matter on 23 centimeters and up. But if we wanted to go lower, we had to do something different. And so we adopted DVB-S2, and we're now commonly running that in about 450 kilohertz. And the other benefit from, besides occupying less spectrum, is that because we are losing less spectrum, the power is spread over a much narrower bandwidth. And so we're seeing enormous signal gains. And we've measured up to 20 dB signal gain between those two signals you see there. So the FM signal would have to be 20 dB more or higher than the digital signal on the right to achieve the same result. So there are significant differences and benefits from going to digital. And these can be seen in these two pictures. Now, these pictures are about 15 years old. So we know that the digital performance has improved significantly, but what they show is a difference between GB3HV when it was running analog at exactly the same power level as it was when it was running digital. As I say, the more recent developments, you would see an even more significant difference between the two. So the change to digital was done, but then we realized actually that if we were to go below 70 SEMS or 437 megahertz, we wouldn't have enough space. Even with digital, we were still, the original systems were 2 megahertz wide, and we just didn't have space to go any lower than 70 centimeters. And so when the opportunity came to move down to 146 megahertz, when Ofcom gave us the 146 megahertz band by NOV, we had to do something different because it was only 1 megahertz wide. And so we kind of reinvented things, and we came up with the phrase reduced bandwidth TV, or RBTV. And that's what enables us to get down below 500 kilohertz. And it's based on the DVB standards, but is just lower data rates and lower bandwidths. So although it was based on the DVB standard, it did mean that standard product wouldn't work. So we've had to develop both transmitters and receivers to enable us to run on these narrower bandwidths. And what you see in the picture there is we developed a USB tuner card, which can be plugged into a PC or into a Raspberry Pi 4, and to receive and decode the amateur pictures, which are in the reduced bandwidth. And through doing this reduced bandwidth, it has enabled us to go on to some of the lower frequencies. And the developments we've seen, particularly on the satellite, are really amazing. We have seen results down to bandwidths of less than 80 kilohertz. And a group of amateurs in France have particularly been pushing the video coding technologies. And this is F4HSL. And that signal is within about 80 kilohertz, and it's full frame video. That's not a JPEG. That would be full frame video. And he's running full HD, which is amazing. And that's in 80 kilohertz. So the move to digital has really enabled us to do things we couldn't do before. So what's happening in the UK? Well, we've got a number of bands in the UK. And the new ATV bands, which have been enabled by this reduced bandwidth, are 50, 71, and 146. So 50 megahertz, up above 51 megahertz in the band. There has been in the band plan, in the IARU Region 1 band plan, there is space for wideband digital experimentation. Ofcom have released the 71 megahertz band for digital experimentation. And we've had the 146 band for about 5 or 6 years now. And that was released purely on the basis of digital experimentation. There's 70 centimeters. We center our activity around 437 megahertz and typically run about half a megahertz in there. 23 SEMS still really is the mainstay of the amateur team VV activity in the UK. And we've got both analog and digital and activity on repeaters and simplex. 13 SEMS, whilst it was reduced significantly after the MOD sold off the spectrum, but there are still repeaters and simplex in there. And that is where the satellite uplink, the Oscar 100 satellite input is located at just above 2400 megahertz. 3.4 gigahertz. There's some TV repeater outputs. We get excellent results in there. It's a lot quieter band than the 13 centimeters. 5.6 gigahertz I've already touched on, and some really interesting projects using very cheap FM TV transmitters. And there are a couple of repeater inputs, TV repeater inputs around there. 10 gigahertz, which has traditionally been one of the big TV bands, is still active and in use with repeaters and simplex. And that's where the QO100 downlink is as well. And the bands above there, 24, 47, and 76. Some of the specialist guys are really pushing the technology up there. And the best DX, for instance, on 24 gigahertz for TV is 138K in the UK. As far as TV repeaters go in the UK, we've got a significant number, actually. Nothing north of the border, but we're always looking out for opportunities. And if groups are interested, feel free to put in an application. Most repeaters have gone digital, mainly on the outputs. Some have retained FM inputs, and they're located, as I've said, in the 23 SEMS, 3.4 and 10 gigahertz bands. And a lot of the repeaters have now got 70 SEMS inputs on 437. But you can find out a lot more details about the repeaters on the RSGB ETCC website. And you'll see various QR codes scattered through my presentation. And if you scan them with your mobile phone, it will take you to the relevant website. And I thought that's quite a good idea to do, because you can't click on links in YouTube. So scanning the QR code achieves the same result. So that's sort of a summary of the activity, a very top level skate across. And what I'd like to do now is look at the first of the three use cases we've been talking about. And it concerns the lower ATV bands. And this is where we're doing a lot of experimentation. So I've already talked about 146.5. We've been there for 6 or 7 years, and we've kind of established our presence there using 0.5 megahertz wide. And the best DX really is about 400K. And I think that's fairly well established. You do require an NOV to transmit on 71 and 146 megahertz, but that's an online application, very easily done. The 51.7 is now in the Region 1 band plan, and we're expecting great things from that. And we're also now looking at experimenting around 29.25. That's being nominated as a channel for wideband digital experiment. And we're hoping that 29 and 51 megahertz, we're going to see some serious DX using some multi-carrier DVB-T modulation, which is much more robust and will overcome multipathing problems that we see on these bands. We know that band 1 Crystal Palace was seen in Australia and South Africa in the sort of 60s and 70s. And so we've got no reason to believe why it shouldn't be possible to work them on 29 and 51. And indeed, some amateurs in VK and SA are already equipped with equipment from the BATC. So we've got high hopes for the lower bands. The second use case I'd take a look at is almost the other end of the spectrum, both in terms of complexity, but also cost and also frequency. We have, for a few years now, had activity on 5.6 gigs using little transmitter modules and receiver modules which have been made for drone first-person video use. And the performance of these is amazing, considering the cost is typically around 20 to 30 pounds. And the great thing about them is that they cover straight out of the box in the UK amateur bands. Now, if you if you've ever bothered to look at 5.6, 5.7 gig band plan on the RSGB website, you'll have noticed that it is quite fragmented. And at the bottom end of the band, there is a channel which around 5665, which most of these units will cover. And that's really where the ATV activity has been centered. And surprising results. So you buy one of these off eBay, you wire it up, use the old camcorder that you've still got sitting in the cupboard under the stairs. You connect up an antenna. You can use a 5.8 gig Wi-Fi, or you can get a Sky Dish available from the local tip. And off you go. The SMA relay, if you chose to run one, is probably the most expensive bit. If not, just do what the top picture shows there, which is to run 2 antennas, one for transmit and one for receive. And what we found is that several of the radio clubs around the UK have really latched onto this and seen that it's a great project. These units are also in use on wideband voice. I know in the Midlands there's quite a lot of people using these units just to do wideband voice, and there was a project published in Practical Wireless called the Siren Project to do exactly that. It needs a line of sight path, but if you've got a line of sight path, 25 kilometers is easy, and the best DX so far is about 160 kilometers. So they really do go given the right conditions. And in fact, David, our host tonight, came along to see what we were doing when we were up in Norfolk on the North Norfolk coast experimenting on 5.6 gigahertz. And we've got a short video that Tammy's going to run for us now, just where David really introduces the whole idea of the fun you can have with such a cheap and easy system and to get going. So can we have the video, Tammy?
Hello from Norfolk Amateur Radio Club. You're coming to you live from the cliffs at West Runton, and this is on Facebook Live. We're trying to show you this because we're just making a transmission between here and Bridlington in Yorkshire, and we're doing it straight across the water with only about half a watt of power. Now, we've got several people here from various clubs, including Noel G8GTZ from the British Amateur Television Club. So if I can just do this, we can have a chat with Noel. So Noel, can you just tell us what's happening? What have we been doing? And we've just succeeded,
so
I think.
We're receiving pictures from Bridlington in Yorkshire, and it's a UK record. I think it's about 180k in the end, but yeah, on 5.6 gigahertz using the 20-pound drone transmitters into dishes like this. So
okay.
Yeah. And here's a live picture of him at his end.
So this is what we're looking at now. We're now looking at the signal coming from Yorkshire to here, yeah? Fantastic. And we really didn't know if this was going to work, Noel, right?
We did not.
I mean, the whole purpose of the hobby, indeed, what was the point of having amateur radio if you can't experiment and see what's happening? So let's have a quick look at this area. This is one of the surplus antennas bought recently from a rally, I think for £5. Goes into a little SMA connector link into a box with a transmitter and receiver and everything in there. And let's go over to the other group of guys here. Several people from the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club and Kings Lynn Radio Club here having a look, and we're just going to have a look down the picture. Now, nothing would be complete without improvisation, so we have a nice, which brand is this? A Felix cat food box, which is an excellent visor for the sun. If I can just get this close enough, you can have a look. And that is a live picture coming to you from Yorkshire. Roughly how far is that coming from?
About 156 kilometres, I think, worked out.
156 kilometres, roughly. So
156.
I think, yeah, it was just a bit further than the record, I think.
Don't look too smug, at least not on camera, will you, please? And we've got Sonny here, we've got William here as well, and we're all going to start setting up other bits of gear to experiment. It's a beautiful day here, as you can see, at West Runton. We've got Pete and Pete down there. Helps if everybody's name's the same, I can't forget it then. but it's looking beautiful. And of course what we're here for, to try this amateur television gear. I think the wonderful thing is that this equipment is very expensive and is very easy to buy. Some would even say maybe we're cheating a little bit because we're buying ready to run equipment that was actually meant for a lot of these drones that are going about. But the equipment is incredibly cheap. About £20 will buy you a transmitter and receiver, and then an old camcorder and a spare monitor that you might have. And of course, don't forget the Felix cat food box. And you can do this sort of thing. So it's wonderful to experiment in this hobby. That's the whole point of it. After all, we didn't know if it would work. Just set it up, and within half an hour we're on the air. Just another aspect of amateur radio. This is amateur television. If you want to know more about the hobby, then look at www.rsgb.org. To find out more about amateur television, you can look at the BATC website, and of course our own club, Norfolk Amateur Radio Club, is at www.norfolkamateurradio.org. Thanks for watching.
Okay, so that kind of gives an example of sort of fun you can have. A couple of points. Don't expect to do 160 kilometres every day of the year. I think we struck very lucky on that particular day with the weather and also the conditions. And also that video was first published by David and the Norfolk Amateur Radio Club on their Facebook page, and I think we have to just acknowledge that Facebook would own the copyright on that. So that's kind of the second example of amateur television on air. And the third thing I really want to cover, an example of something that's really changed amateur television in the last 2 or 3 years since it was launched, is the QO100 satellite. Now, some of you may know from have worked sideband and narrowband on it, but there is also a digital ATV transponder up there, and it gives us 8 megahertz of spectrum, which covers 1/3 of the Earth. So it's really amazing. I'm not sure any of us really ever thought that we'd be able to sit in our shacks in the UK and see live ATV pictures from India and Brazil. It really is amazing. And the other thing it's done, it's really encouraged amateur television experimentation, both in terms of reducing the bandwidth, but also antennas and dishes and everything else around it. So it really has been a fantastic enabler for amateur television. And it's also meant that amateur television is no longer local. I just grabbed a few of the test cards from over the weekend or over the last week that I've seen on there. And the middle one there on the left-hand side is Brazil, PY2RN. I missed, there's an Indian station comes up very regularly, VU, but a lot of Europeans, obviously Italians, Germans, Spanish, Portuguese, and you can see them all in full high resolution on there, and it is amazing and very easy to receive. You need a 1 meter dish really to receive them, and a standard dish electronics, the LNB box, but you then need a special receiver, which I'll come and talk about shortly. On transmit, that's 2.4 gigahertz up, and that's where we talk about the Portsdown transmitter system, which is something I'll talk about shortly. And you need about 25 to 30 watts, depending on dish size. But it does mean that amateur television is no longer local. It really is not. It's really opened up new horizons for us. And one of the things that happens regularly on there on a Thursday night at 8 o'clock is the British Amateur Television Club has a net of members, both from the UK and Europe, where people come up, and for about an hour and a half, we just exchange ideas. And I put together a short video of various members or various people coming up on the net and just talking about what they're doing. And I think it gives a really good feel of what amateur television is really about and the uniqueness of amateur television, and this ability to be able to talk to people about things and show them things that you would not be able to do without it. The net is streamed live, so you can watch. Just go to the BATC website. You can watch every Thursday night at 8 o'clock. And it really is a good insight into what amateur television is doing today. So if we can just have a quick look at that, Tammy, that would be great. Thank you very much.
Good evening all from G8GTZ. Main activity, getting a Portsdown update out the door. That introduced the C930 camera. Okay, quite a lot of us on tonight, so please try and keep the overs short. Round to Mike, G0MJW.
I just thought I'd show you this, seeing as it's topical. This is the latest Aurora forecast, the Ovation forecast from the Met Office after the two space weather events that happened today. That's going to be a pretty big Aurora, and good to hear everyone and see everyone. I've seen a few people testing so far, so look forward to seeing what is said. Right, in the interest of keeping overs short, here is the bench, just to show you what's on there. Various bits have arrived this week, but I've not had much chance to do anything. Slightly out of shot. In fact, I shall move it so that it's not out of shot. Here's this. It'll be interesting to see if that's any good for DATV purposes. That's one of the new Pi0 Mark IIs. So let's pass it round. M0YDH, G0MJW.
Okay, what have I been doing since I last came on? Well, I haven't been coming on too often. It's a thing. We'll go for wobbly, shaky cam. And first of all, the all-important die-cast box containing a Pluto, which mysteriously then connects automatically first time. Amazing. We should all do that. So I went to a workshop and I made something. So I made a device which G7NTG should be playing, not me. There you go. It's a cigar box guitar.
Somebody else mentioned just now a load for testing power supplies. Well, I use a very simple one, which I've been using for years for testing high power audio amplifiers, and it's just two whacking great 4 ohm wire wound resistors and a switch on the front which puts them in series or parallel.
I think I'll just show Jim this picture because he might be interested in it. This is the PA that I made up. Yeah, and that's the inside of it. So I follow very much the pictures that that Jim provided of his in the write-up.
Okay, 70 cms cavity, and it's been turned into one of those. A couple of SMA sockets and some probes, and with a single rod it tunes 24 cms quite happily.
Right, good evening all. Literally in from work probably about 10 minutes ago, so right, a few things to show, and just one last thing before I hand over to David. Let me just show you this. I tweeted this on Twitter the other day, but basically this is, I think it must be a switch mode power supply, but it's on 24/7 around here. It's never ever off. But, that area there is MFS.
So with that, I will close the net, but say thank you very much to everybody for coming on. Look forward to seeing as many of you as possible on the air on Sunday on 70 cms.
Okay, so hopefully that gave you a taster of what amateur television is like these days. and that was all on the QO100 satellite. So those guys were uplinking their signals from home, and it was being received, and each of us would have a receiver at home to receive the satellite. But also that net every Thursday night at 8 o'clock is streamed live on the BATC website. So anybody, even though they haven't got a receiver or capability to receive it, can tune in and watch the net. So hopefully I've whetted your appetite enough to think, maybe this could be interesting, but what do I have to do? Well, as David said, at the beginning, digital ATV could be seen as being more complex than amateur television, than analog television. But the ATV community, in its widest sense, and I mean that, a number of people from around the world really have come together and both developed hardware and software, and done it in such a way that it's very accessible to everybody. We haven't just done the technology and left it at that. We've made sure that the technology is accessible to everybody. And we do that through publishing all of the designs, making them open source. We sell all the hard-to-get pieces in the BATC shop. And we even sell pre-programmed SD cards for the Raspberry Pi. So although you can download the software and program the SD cards yourself, we do actually sell those cards in the shop as well to make it easy for you. And the projects really, the major projects, there are 4 in total. One is a project that you may have heard of, hopefully, called the Portsdown. And this is really the centerpin of what we do. This is developed by Dave, G8GTZ, and is a transceiver. So it does all of the transmitting of the DATV signals, but also if you plug in the optional receiver card, it can also receive. And that receiver card is called the mini tuner, and it's a USB card that can be plugged either into the RPi4 or into the PC, and can be used to receive all of the narrowband signals that I've been talking about. The mini tuner, it's a French name. It was developed by Jean-Pierre S6DZP, and to whom the ATV community really owes a lot. We would not have been able to do half of what we do now if Jean-Pierre had not developed that hardware and software. And then the other project, which is sponsored by BATC, is the Winter Hill multi-channel receiver. And this is a receiver that is aimed specifically at the Satellite QO100, and enables you to watch multiple channels at once. And more importantly, or most importantly, all of these projects have got a lot of support from the ATV community. And so it's easy for anybody to come in and get started. So what I want to do now is just take a look at each of these individual projects. And the first one, because that's probably where we recommend you to start, which is with the receiver. And the RIDE receiver uses a Raspberry Pi 4. So it's a Raspberry Pi 4 driving an HDMI or a composite monitor. And you can use your infrared remote control. And I say your remote control because it can be programmed to use any remote control. And it uses the custom hardware, which is called the mini tuner receiver card. And that is easy to build. There's no surface mount. It's all leaded components. And all of the hard to get bits, such as the tuner, the PCB, and the USB module, are all available from the BATC shop. You just add a few resistors and capacitors and 1 or 2 other bits and pieces, which you can buy from the normal sources. And you've built yourself a USB tuner card, which can then be reused on the RIDE and other projects. And the RIDE itself tunes from, and there's a typo on the slide, tunes from 144 megs, so it covers the 146 band, right up to 450 megahertz. So it does cover the QO100 bands, and also the amateur band 70 centimeters, 23 cms, and 13 centimeters. It receives all of the DVB-S modes, and as I say, can be used just to drive the shack monitor in either HD or composite. And it really is the tool, very easy to use, and can be used to receive all of the QO100 and local repeater signals. And there's a QR code up the top of the screen next to the name, which will take you to the wiki, the BATC wiki, which is really our reference library of where the details are for all of our projects. So if you scan that code with your smartphone, it will take you to the web page. So that's the receiver, and the transmitter side of things is done by what the project we know as Portsdown. And the Portsdown project was really brought about to try and bring digital amateur television to everyone. There again, it's based around a Raspberry Pi 4. It uses the Raspberry Pi standard 7-inch touch screen. So it's all touch screen control. The RF bit is done by either a Lime SDR or a Pluto, which are plugged in on the USB ports. You can plug in the mini tuner USB receiver card that I talked about, and it will also receive. And the great thing about this is we sell you the pieces, and it's up to you how you build it. There is as many Portsdowns as there are people who built them. And we have sold over 700 sets of parts around the world, and there are significant numbers of people who built them. And the thrill of having built it and use it really is fantastic. You know, it requires some hands-on construction, but not much, and you get that real "I made that" buzz. And it is the easy way to get onto digital ATV at relatively low cost. The Raspberry Pi is £40, the touchscreen is £60, and a Lime or a Pluto will cost you about £150 in that order of magnitude. So the very basic system really does enable you to get on. And whilst it's basic, it's still comprehensive. It will do everything you need to do. And to give a breakdown of what it is, as I said, at the heart of it, it's a Raspberry Pi with the standard Raspberry Pi touchscreen. And on the left-hand side, you can see the inputs. So you can drive it with a Logitech C920 webcam or the Raspberry Pi cam. You can use the Raspberry Pi cam to generate pictures. It will take audio from a USB dongle, and there is capability to put composite video in from the old yellow phono sockets on your camcorder, although currently we're having difficulty getting that USB dongle due to the component supply problems around the world. At the bottom of the picture, you see the optional mini tuner, and on the right hand side is the hardware that you can use to actually generate the RF. And we've listed there the Lime SDR and the Pluto. There is one card which was available until relatively recently, which is called the DATV Express. And that will give you everything you need. It will do DVB-S, DVB-T, symbol rates as wide as or as narrow as you want them. So sort of 80 kilohertz up to 4.5 megahertz wide signals. Relatively low output, so there is a little bit more systems work to be done. It's about a milliwatt out. And as I say, a variety of inputs. It will also take an input from an IPTS stream out of programs such as vMix or OBS for the more advanced users. And I said it's easy to construct. It is easy to construct. You can actually do it, no soldering. Dave G8GTZ very proudly put an article in the BATC magazine, which was called Portsdown No Soldering, and he just proved that actually it is so simple to put together a system that you don't even need to solder anything. So if you take the Raspberry Pi, the Pi camera, the Lime SDR or a Pluto, and the touch screen, all of those can be done without soldering anything. and it all just goes together and works. As I say, you can buy a pre-programmed SD card from the BATC shop, where you can also get the hard-to-get components and PCBs. We do a number of PCBs. And there, and again, the QR code at the top of the page will take you to the right place on the BATC wiki. So they're the two main components I'm going to talk about tonight, which is the ride receiver and the Portsdown transmitter and transceiver. But that's not quite all of the picture, obviously. You've now got to do a little bit more around that. And so if we were to look at what you actually need for a DATV receive system, well, there's kind of two ways to go. If you want to start to do it on receive and transmit on 146 or 437 or wherever, the good news is that you can use your narrowband antennas, preamps, and coax. So the stuff that you've put up to work SSB or FT8 can also be used for TV. One slight comment is that the mini tuner, this USB card that we've developed, does need extra amplification on receive because it was designed for a satellite system. And the satellite systems, the electronics that goes on the dish, has an enormous amount of gain. And so we have to compensate for that when we try and use it on terrestrial systems. But you can use satellite line amps, the F-type ones that are available on eBay. You will need to put a bandpass filter in there, but that will work. That's all the system you need to receive digital TV. For QO100, it's even easier. You just need to put your LNB directly into the mini tuner receiver, and it will work, provided your dish is pointing at Oscar 100. You will receive digital ATV signals. And a note to those on microwaves: all you have to do is just use your transverter. Just put your microwave transverter directly into mini tuner, perhaps a little bit more amplification, but it will then work on the higher frequency bands. So receive is particularly easy. It really is. For transmit, perhaps slightly more complex. So you take your ports down and you build it in a nice box, which this guy here has done. You can still use your narrowband antennas. I wouldn't use the preamp on transmit, but you can use the coax. And Portsdown typically produces approximately 1 milliwatt or 0 dBm. And so you do need some significant amplification. And the Chinese drivers that we see both on Alibaba or on AliExpress or eBay are fine, but you just need to be careful. You must underrun amplifiers when you're talking about DATV. Typically, a 10 watt amplifier should be run in the area of 1 to 1.5 watts. There's about a 10 dB back off because the DATV signals are much wider than your narrowband signals. Generally, there are surplus PAs available for power amplifiers available for most bands. Transmit filters are essential because both the Pluto and the Lime SDR, they generate square wave RF, and so the harmonic content from a Pluto or a Lime is pretty bad, and you do need to filter them. And don't forget, if you're starting to use complex systems, don't forget to sequence the transmit and receive changeover. So really, that's talked about transmit and receive for digital ATV, and talked about how you could put them together in a system. Clearly, if you need more help, the BATC and the BATC members are there to help. But I just want to cover on 2 more slides some of the other facilities that we have now developed into the Portsdown. This Portsdown transceiver system has got so much potential because it's a Raspberry Pi, and it's a Raspberry Pi with a touch screen, and it can do so much more. Now, the first thing to talk about is the Langston SDR transceiver. And this shares the same hardware as Portsdown 4 and has been developed alongside Portsdown by Colin G4EML. And once you've built a Portsdown, you can instantly just load the software to run the Langston. And this runs on the Pluto, and it gives you a fully featured multi-mode transceiver. With a receive waterfall, you can do FM, sideband, CW. There's a built-in CW keyer. And it's all software driven. This particular unit you're seeing here is my microwave unit that I use. I no longer use the FT290 and FT790 that I used to do as my microwave drivers. I use this. The tuning knob on the front is a CNC rotary encoder, which gives a very good rotary tuning with proper heavyweight feel. And so the Langston really is a superb piece of equipment that covers up to 5.7 gigs, and there is a 10 gig extension possible on the Pluto. And so not only do you get the Portsdown, but you also get the Pluto in the same package. And that really is, you get the Langston in the same package, and really makes it very, very versatile. If you're just thinking of doing narrowband transceiver, the Langston is available as a separate download in its own right. But certainly worth thinking about if you're thinking about getting going on the microwave bands. That's the easy way to go. And the second aspect of Portsdown, which as a system is growing, and by the way, the QR code there takes you to the Langston wiki. The second thing I want to talk about very briefly is test equipment. As I say, a Raspberry Pi with a touch screen and some SDR hardware really opens up what can be done. And Dave G8GTZ has expanded the capability of the Portsdown to include several useful features of test equipment. First of all, signal generator. And so you've connected your Lime or your Pluto, and Dave has done a signal generator screen, which is included in all Portsdown software. And this enables you to generate through the Lime or the Pluto useful carriers up to, depending on which hardware you're using, up to 6 gigahertz. It will also control things like the Chinese PCBs for the ADF4351 synthesizers. It will also control the higher band synthesizers, such as the ADF5355, but also the LCOM and the Nort SLO synthesizers. So a very, very useful piece of test equipment. Gives everybody in their shack now a signal generator. With the Pluto, you can get up to nearly 6 gigahertz. The other facility Dave is building into the Portsdown is a noise figure meter. It does require an external noise head, but it gives all of the capability to measure both system and device, such as preamps, noise figure for receive. A very, very useful capability. There's also the capability to run a power meter using an external 88318 power sensor. And Dave is currently working on doing a tracking generator display using the Lime SDR to enable alignment of filters. And all of this is included in the Portsdown software as standard. So, sort of coming to the end of the presentation, I think it's just worth looking back and a quick look at the BATC, or the British Amateur Television Club. And really, we've very much taken the attitude at BATC that we've got to drive the hobby. And we do this through generating new projects and new interests. And it's really paid dividends for the hobby and the ATV community worldwide, and we've seen our membership increase over the last 3 or 4 years, and we're now up to about 1,400 members worldwide. Those members get access to the quarterly CQTV magazine, in which is full of articles and projects and the latest updates on what we're doing with software and Portsdown. We've got a strong online presence. We think it's essential that people are given the information where they need it. And so we've generated the wiki, which is our reference library where details on all of the projects I've talked about is. There's a members forum and incredible support from the community worldwide here. You go up and ask a question, be it a complex question or a simple question, and you will get an answer on the forum. It's a great community spirit. And then we run the members shop, which we sell PCBs for all of our projects and the other hard to get bits. And we sell all of those at cost to our members. And so we believe that, you know, by building this active community, we're providing help and support to everyone who is interested in amateur television. And really, you know, amateur television is undergoing a real revival. You know, there's lots of interesting projects to join in on. And I said at the beginning that it's all about having fun building, experimenting and learning. And everything is open source. There's no real secrets. And there's something there for everybody, from the beginners to the seasoned professionals, i.e. those of us who are getting longer in the tooth. And we run activity days and contests and the satellite operation. And, you know, cameras, video editing, everything and anything is what the world of amateur television offers you. So why not give it a go? And the 3 main links really there are our website, our wiki and our forum. And again, if you scan the QR codes with your smartphone, you'll be taken straight to those facilities. And I think that just about wraps it up, David.
Well, thank you very much. I'll let you have a quick break from that, Noel. Thank you ever so much for that so far. We've already got a couple of questions and comments, which of course I'll read to you in a moment. But if you have got a question for Noel and you haven't already done so, please ask it now, either on the YouTube chat or on the BATC messaging service. And please don't forget to include your first name and your call sign if you've got one as well. Noel, I'll kick off, if that's all right, with Paul Weaver, who's a foundation license holder, and asks, how can I develop an interest in the hobby before I actually do anything myself? Also earlier I noticed he asked, you know, as a foundation holder, can he transmit and what can he do and what his limits are? And also, is it possible to go mobile or portable with the DATV?
Okay, thanks for the question. First of all, I understand I'm not that well ginned up on the regulations, but I understand that there is some issue with foundation licenses not being able to run non-commercial equipment. So you're a little bit limited in what you can do whilst you're still at foundation level. Although there's absolutely nothing stopping you, and this is probably where the Anglo would suggest you should go, is to build a receiver and start to listen and look around on QO100. And that will really give you a flavor and really whet your appetite and encourage you to get on and do the full license, because the receiver is relatively simple. We'd recommend you go for the ride receiver. So the hardware is just non-surface mount, all leaded components, and it's the Raspberry Pi driving the big screen. And really that would be a way to move forward and something you can do as foundation license holder with and then look forward to being able to transmit once you get the full license. Regarding portable, you've probably asked the right person, really. Yes, I spend most of my time out portable. It's where I do most of my operation from, and pretty much like every other amateur who goes portable, we know where all the high hilltops are, and most of the contest activity and activity days is done out portable. So yes, absolutely we go out portable.
Yeah, good. Thanks, Noel. Yeah, it was some years ago when you showed that video. I didn't know, you didn't give me notice particularly, except a couple of days ago when we did a rehearsal, that you were going to show that. Was that 4 years ago, I think? Something like that?
Yeah, I think it was.
Nice hot summer.
2017.
Yes,
yeah.
Good. Okay, moving on to some other questions. I'm going to read one now that actually was a question posed just before the presentation started tonight from Terry G3VFC, who asked, does anyone still use analog or 625 PAL? Now, I know you've covered a little bit about analog, but does anybody still use it? I know you said some of the repeaters have got analog input still.
Yes, and I think that's, I would say most of the repeaters have still got analog, 23 centimeters FM analog inputs, and that's PAL. The other PAL that I talked about is, of course, the 5.6 gigahertz drone transmitters. That is all still PAL as well. Yes, is the answer. There is still analog, particularly on 23 centimeters. Yes.
Thank you, Noel. Sark, I hope I pronounced your name right, W4RIS, says, what would be the preferred SDR, the Lime or the Adalm Pluto?
It's a little bit of horses for courses. They've both got their pluses and minuses. The Pluto has got greater coverage range, and the Pluto actually was what the Langston SDR transceiver was built around, although Colin has done a release last week which enables you to use the Lime for the Langston as well. The factor that will probably persuade you to go for the Pluto right now, if you're looking to buy right now, is that unfortunately Lime have been affected by the worldwide silicon shortage, and so it's not possible to buy Limes at the moment, whereas Plutos are still available. So really very little to choose between them, but probably if you wanted to get into it right now, you'd probably have to go with the Pluto.
Yes, I mean, we were aware, obviously people are looking at this from all around the world. We've got quite a few viewers, for example, in America, so it may be different for you, but as you say, Noel, I had a quick look as well earlier this evening, and the Pluto is available from at least Farnell and Mauser at the moment, but the Lime is quite some way off, I think, because they're not quoting a date. So, and also the Raspberry Pi, which has been in and out of stock, but again, that is readily available as I looked tonight anyway.
Yep.
So one of the other questions from David Johnson says, you are supporting the Lime and Pluto devices. Are there possibilities of others, such as USRP? So I'm sure G8GTZ is watching somewhere, and he would want me to say a definitive no. It's basically all down to support. All of the code is open source. If somebody wants to come in and help us do support for other SDR platforms, I'm sure Dave would welcome it. But right now, to be honest, he is more than tied up doing the two platforms. And if he was to take on another SDR platform, it would really tie him up full time, so he would be unable to develop the other facilities that he's developing. So the answer realistically is no, not at this point in time. But if somebody would like to take it on, we'd love to talk to them. Yeah, good. Okay, that's good. One of the questions I had, as someone who's one of the older electronic engineers, been always interested in amateur television, but that was when I played around with analog and it was all hardware. The software side can make people slightly nervous who are mainly hardware engineers. Do you have to know much about software to be able to program and set up the Raspberry Pi and so on?
No. We, as I said a couple of times, we sell the SD cards in the shop. So you can literally take if you want to do a Portsdown, you can take the RPi4 out of the box. You can plug in on the multi-way ribbon the 7-inch touch screen. You can buy an SD card from the BATC shop, plug it in, and switch it on, and that's it. There is no need for you to get involved in command lines and SSH and all of those other wonderful things. It really is plug and play, and you can then use your skills to develop the hardware, the RFE bits. But the other side of it, we have deliberately tried to make it as easy as possible, because we did realise it could be a barrier to entry for people.
Yeah, thanks. We've just put on the bottom of the screen now the URL to look at the BATC club. I know you wouldn't be so modest as to mention the price, but it is a very modest price, isn't it? It's about £8 a year to join if it's all online.
Yep, that's correct. We do a cyber membership whereby you get the CQTV magazine in PDF form, and yes, it's £8. The website itself isn't particularly dynamic, where a lot of the information held is in the wiki, and all of the interactive discussion and support between members takes place on the forum. But on the website, you will find the shop. You'll find the BATC streamer where you can watch the QO100 net and things like that. And it's also, as David says, where you can join the BATC, which we would encourage you to do, of course.
Yeah, thank you, Noel. I've got a question now from Lawrence, G2DD. It says, do you need to lock the latest version of the Pluto to an external reference? He understands that the mod is not easy.
So for amateur television, because the bandwidth, even though we're running digital, the bandwidths we're running are sufficiently large enough that actually, if it's a little, if we're not worried about frequency stability or accuracy to within, as much as you would be when you're on narrowband. And so, no, you can use a standard Pluto as it is. What you do need to do with the Pluto is do the frequency extension. The Pluto itself, when it comes, I forget the upper limit. I think it's something like 350 megahertz. But anyway, there is the capability to do a frequency extension, and to use it on Portsdown, you do need that frequency extension done. Now, the easiest way to do that is to download a wonderful program called SATSAGEN, SATSAGEN, and that gives you spectrum analyzer capabilities. But the advantage is that when you plug your Pluto into the PC and run this program, it will do the frequency extension for you. So even then, you don't have to get involved in doing any nasty command lines. You can run this program, it will do the frequency extension, and then you can just plug the Pluto directly into your Portsdown.
Thank you, Noel. Just a couple more now, I think, from G4GUO, who says, by the way, the membership is free to youngsters, which is, thanks for that. And also,
that's true.
And let's hope there's some youngsters watching who might like to get involved with this. And he also says that you could use GNU radio with the USRP for DATV.
You could.
Mike Willis says you can use a USRP using GNU radio, and that was my first SDR source, but you need to make your own software. Others have done it, but not supported by the Portsdown.
Correct. That's correct. Yes. Yes. I mean, that really is away from what I've been talking about tonight, which is where we're trying to do things to make it very, very simple for people. Yes. If you are interested in this and are more than computer capable, GNU radio really is the tool for you guys to use. But really what the presentation was aimed at was probably the people who are much happier plugging hardware together and slightly concerned about software.
Thank you, Noel. Keith G8GTZ says, Bursary offer this for groups who want to set up new repeaters. I don't know if you know about that.
Yeah, so the BATC does run a bursary scheme. So if you've got a worthwhile club project or want to put a TV repeater on the air, or as I say, as a club, you think you'd like to get involved in receiving QO100 in the clubhouse, and we've had a couple of maker spaces apply for this, we will fund that for you. We will absolutely give you funds. We'll give you components towards building amateur television equipment which will be used at the clubhouse, and we've done that through the what we call the bursary scheme, and that's available on our website, on the BATC website.
Thank you, Noel. One other comment, Paul Weaver has said kits are sold And are they therefore not classed as commercial? I know this came up a few years ago for traditional radios, not necessarily television. I guess if it is a complete kit, then I don't see why it shouldn't be. Like you, I'm not familiar with every little detail about the licensing conditions, but I think commercial kits certainly were allowed to be used.
BATC does not sell kits, unfortunately. We did try selling some kits a few years ago and just found that it was just a lot of hard work for volunteers to assemble the kits. And so we do not sell kits. We sell all the hard to get components, the stuff you can't go on eBay or wherever or Farnell and get. But we don't specifically sell kits, and we sell the PCBs for our own projects, obviously, but they're not classed as kits.
Okay, well, Noel, I think as you said earlier, hopefully this has provided inspiration for Paul there on Foundation and anybody else. Build a receiver, see what you could do with that, and then maybe study for your 2E0 or your M0 or wherever you're watching this in the world for your higher licenses. Just a mention actually, because we do get many international viewers to this.
Yep.
Obviously the frequencies and everything that you've quoted are for the UK, so please check your local band plans in your own country just to make sure that you're transmitting on the frequencies that you're allowed to. Anyway, Noel, thank you very much indeed for this evening. Lots and lots of compliments, which I haven't read to you. And you'll be able to read them for yourself. But everybody says very inspirational, a wonderful way to get started into ATV, something nice to construct as well. So, Noel, thank you very much indeed for tonight's presentation.
Okay. Well, thank you, David, and thanks to the RSGB for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So that concludes this webinar. And thanks again to our guest presenter, Noel G8GTZ. Well, before I go, I'd just like to bring you details of the new RSGB construction competition, which this year has been separated from the convention, and the closing deadline has also been moved to well into the new year, so that entrants have plenty of time over the winter evenings to complete their projects. Well, given that this recent Tonight at 8 webinars, and tonight's and indeed myself, have featured projects that you can make yourself, we hope that may inspire you to enter. Entries free for all RSGB members and will again be all online this year, so you won't have to send your work away to be judged. You can find out more details by going to this special webpage, rsgb.org/construction-competition. It's on the bottom of your screen now. And also full details will be in the new RADCOM arriving with members very soon. Well, we hope you've enjoyed this Tonight at 8 and that you'll be able to join us again next time, where we'll find out how to get started in software construction using a regular computer and some very low-cost hardware. If you'd like to see details of that and previous or future webinars, or to send any comments or feedback to us, please visit rsgb.org/webinars. And a reminder that if you subscribe to the RSGB's YouTube channel, you'll be notified of all upcoming Tonight at 8 webinars, as well as other new videos and presentations from the Society on a wide range of amateur radio topics. But until next time, this is David G7URP signing off and clear. Bye-bye.